Wouldn't it be nice to have a clear conscience?
Dad, is it right to take things from people you don't like?
Sure it is, honey. You do mean stealing, don't you?
Well, actually, it's not as bad as stealing, but my conscience is bothering me.
Your conscience? Lisa, don't let that pushy little weenie tell you what to do.
Homer, that's a terrible thing to say.
Oh, shut up.
Yes, sir.
To sleep better, to think straighter, speak more honestly, and not carry that weird mental residue from things you know are off or things that you've done in your past. A clear conscience is not just about morality. It's about freedom, your energy, self-respect, and being able to live without secretly fighting yourself. Welcome back to Thinking and Being. Happy Memorial Day, thus the military-themed Eagles hat. Why did I want to think about this topic? Conscience is something that we really take for granted. I really think about it as something that people carry around every day as a burden that affects their everyday life and their everyday decisions. If you could have a clear conscience, just think about how much better life could be every day. So first, let's start with what is conscience? Conscience is an inner sense that helps you feel when something is right, wrong, aligned, dishonest, clean, or compromised. It's not in just what you do, but in why you do it and what you avoid doing. It acts like an internal witness or moral compass, reacting not only to obvious wrongdoing, but also to half-truths, rationalizations, betrayals of self, and moments where you know you're out of alignment. It's deeper than simple guilt or social rule following. Guilt can be noisy and neurotic, but conscience often feels quieter and more precise and lasting, like a truth signal very deep inside of you. And Pinocchio is basically a children's story about conscience. Jiminy Cricket is the externalized inner voice saying, hey, maybe don't be an idiot. And the whole story is what happens when impulse, or System 1 thinking, outruns inner guidance, or System 2 thinking. Another example is Darth Vader. When someone keeps violating conscience long enough that power, fear, and identity completely drown out whatever was left of the inner signal. It's not exactly a very good wellness journey. So why is consciousness important? A functioning conscience helps keep your behavior aligned with your deeper values instead of letting impulse, comfort, convenience, fear, or peer pressure make your decisions for you. It affects everyday quality of life more than people admit. Your peace of mind, your sleep, your confidence, your clarity, your trustworthiness, and even the ease with which you make eye contact and speak truthfully. When conscience is ignored too long, the cost is not always dramatic at first. It often shows up as inner friction, mental heaviness, anxiety, irritability, self-division, and the subtle feeling that something about you is not clean. And I also have a theory about your health, which is certainly not founded, but I feel like it could be true. Conscience can be directly related to your physical health. When you have a cluttered conscience, not a clear conscience, you're carrying around burdens that directly, adversely affect your health. And that is something you can't risk. And let's look deeper at the word. The word conscience can be read as conscience, or with knowing, with knowledge, which suggests some kind of inner knowing that accompanies your actions and judges them in real time. It's like you really know. There's a part of you that really knows what's right and what's wrong. That makes conscience sound less like a religious scolding device and more like a living form of awareness, a built-in sense that knows when your life is matching truth and when it is drifting away from it. And perhaps when you're selling your soul to something maybe you shouldn't be. It's not science in the lab coat sense, but it does suggest that inner life has its own kind of evidence and precision. You often know why, very directly, when you are lying, hiding, posturing, avoiding, or living cleanly. And then there's that similar word, consciousness. And let's talk about what the difference is between the two. Consciousness is the larger field of awareness, the fact that you can experience, notice, reflect, and observe, while conscience is one of the moral and evaluative functions that operates inside that field. It's like the measurer or evaluator that's always there and reminding you of those results. You could say that consciousness lets you witness life, but conscience comments on how you are living it. So consciousness sees and conscience weighs. Consciousness observes and conscience judges, meaning and alignment. The more awake, still, and self-honest your consciousness becomes, the easier it may be to hear conscience clearly, because there is less noise, less denial, and less constant distraction drowning it out. So what does it feel like to have a clear conscience? I would bet that most of you watching right now don't have a clear conscience. And that could be for a number of reasons, some of them partially out of your control. However, some of you do have a clear conscience, and you can ask yourself that question and usually get a pretty clear answer. A clear conscience often feels like lightness and less mental static, less rehearsing, less justifying, less wishing you had something differently, less carrying invisible weight around all the time. It can show up as ease in silence, deeper rest, cleaner speech, more comfort being alone with yourself, because a lot of people are just not comfortable being by themselves, let's be honest. And the sense that your inner world is not quietly splitting into competing versions of you. It's not the same as being perfect. It's more like being internally undivided, not secretly managing in the background everything that you know is off, not performing innocence, and not living with a running background process of moral tension. Why does getting to a clear conscience matter in everyday life? And no, I'm not talking about achieving the level of clear in Scientology. Not talking about that. Getting clear frees up energy that would otherwise be spent on guilt, hiding, over-explaining, self-protection, image management, rationalization, and all the subtle labor of keeping misalignment afloat. It improves decision-making because you're not constantly working around unresolved inner conflict. Your mind gets straighter when you stop protecting things that should have been cleaned up. Everyday life becomes more solid, more peaceful, and more trustworthy when you're no longer secretly carrying around something that your deeper self knows is unfinished, or dishonest, or beneath you. How do people typically tend to ignore all this? And many of us do. People often drown conscience out with distraction, or busyness, or noise, or substances, or endless content, or gossip, or overwork, and burnout, or constant stimulation because silence makes inner truth easier to hear. They rationalize misalignment by saying things like, everybody does it, or it's not that bad, or I had no choice, or this is just how the world works and I'm okay with it, which may reduce discomfort temporarily but does not actually clear up anything. In modern life, a lot of people treat conscience like weakness, inconvenience, or old-fashioned moral baggage. But that may be because a clear conscience demands change, apology, restraint, truth, courage, and not just vibes. So if you think you may not have a clear conscience, that's okay. Let's talk about some tips on how to make steps towards a clear conscience. First, tell the truth where you have been hiding, exaggerating, manipulating, dodging, flattering, pretending, or omitting. Because clarity usually begins with honesty, not with a feeling. Second, repair what can still be repaired. Apologize, confess, return what should be returned, stop what should be stopped. Clean up what can be cleaned up, and accept consequences where necessary instead of endlessly postponing them. And then build a habit of inner check-ins so you can catch misalignment early. A few honest minutes of reflection, journaling, prayer, silence, meditation, or walking, or just walking around can prevent small compromises from turning into a heavier inner life that drags you down. So what do some of the smartest people that ever lived say about this? We'll talk about two Carls. The first Carl is Carl Sagan. Sagan treated consciousness as one of the most astonishing things in existence. His famous idea that humans are a way for the cosmos to know itself, and that suggests that awareness is not trivial, but one of the rarest and strangest features of the universe. He didn't really want to emphasize conscience the way some psychologists did, but he clearly believed that greater knowledge should produce greater responsibility, humility, and care, not more arrogance and recklessness. For Sagan, a wider perspective should deepen moral seriousness. If we are conscious beings in a tiny, fragile world, then awareness should make us more careful, more ethical, and less petty. Then let's talk about Carl Jung, who was a famous psychologist. Carl Jung saw conscience as a deeper social obedience, not just following the rules, but an inner signal that reacts when you betray truth, deny your shadow, or live out of alignment with your deeper self. He believed that consciousness is only a small island in a much larger unconscious sea, which means people are influenced by hidden motives, wounds, fears, and contradictions far more than they realize. For Jung, real growth required both clearer consciousness and a cleaner conscience. You become more whole by facing what is hidden, morally uncomfortable, or repressed, rather than pretending you are already integrated. To recap, then, conscience is one of the deepest forms of inner intelligence because it protects integrity, peace, alignment, and the ability to live without secretly fighting yourself all the time. Ignoring it may seem easier in the short term, but the cost usually compounds over time in the form of tension, confusion, fragmentation, moral numbness, and a life that feels progressively less clean, and potentially physical disease. So getting clear is worth striving for because a clear conscience may be one of the purest forms of freedom available to us today. Not freedom to do whatever you want, but freedom from inner division, hidden weight, and self-betrayal.
No.
All right, so that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep thinking and being, and do not go gentle into that good night.